All right. Today, we want to talk about. I thought about talking to you about a new book that we have available, and it's Emma helped us produce it. It's I always get lost on this camera. I got to go the opposite way I want to go. A.E. Knoch's FBI Files. Now, I'll be honest with you right up front. You know, if you're looking for Bible study, this is this is not a Bible study, and I have no. We have certain of our books that I would love our readers to have a copy of, just because they are enlightening, edifying, realizationally based information, and it's a joy to see them go out in packages. And I'm all good if no one gets this, but I thought it was important as a piece of history to make this available. I was given a copy of this, I don't know, 15 years ago, I suppose. My copy was a comb, was just simply a mimeographed copy with comb binding. Actually, Gene Douglas from Georgia got this information. He requested from the Freedom of Information Act. He requested this information. I don't know. I don't remember the story. I don't know if he had heard that the FBI had a full-fledged investigation of Knoch. So he wrote for it, and he gave me a copy. And so I had Emma scan it so that we could just sort of preserve it. I think it has a historical place, a little bit to understand wartime government actions during World War II, so that we sort of have that perspective. But also there's some information about Knoch in there and his wife, Sigrid, and even Gellisnoff and others. There's some information in here. I love history, and I love to learn about the lives of those who've meant a lot to me, such as Knoch and Gellisnoff, and even Bullinger's alluded to in this in these FBI files. And so it's just fascinating. And for me, who loves history and just has a human interest, curiosity, even the Unsearchable Riches, Knoch's periodical, contains not enough personal stuff, and actually these files help to fill in a little bit of the gap. And so we're just going to go over history, and it actually has a point that I'm going to make at the end. And if you see this book on our website, you'll at least know what it's about, and you won't even need to get a copy because I'm going to explain it to you, and that should satisfy most people. So anyway, ever how it happened, A.E. Knoch and the Concordant Publishing Concern came on the radar in the early 1940s. And J. Edgar Hoover was concerned about Knoch and the operation of the Concordant, whether they were, well, to quote his language. By the way, most of the documentation is correspondence between J. Edgar Hoover and so J. Edgar Hoover's talking about Knoch. So Knoch, he got some national secret interest, which is just fascinating to me. Here's this nobody doing, who even knows what Knoch's doing, but J. Edgar Hoover knows what he's doing. Well, he's interested in what he's doing, and so there was concern that Knoch was a German Gestapo agent from the files, and that he was involved in subversive activities in the distribution of German propaganda. And so this is why. So these are correspondence between J. Edgar Hoover and the special agent in charge, which was which I looked into him a little bit too, because just I'm fascinated. It's a hobby of mine, history is. And so R.B. Hood is the other person involved. So they're writing back and forth, and Jagger's checking in on the progress, and Hood is responding. Interestingly enough, I found out that Hood, I was curious about his background. Now, when we say he was a special agent in charge, that's like the top sphere of the agents under J. Edgar Hoover. And he was in charge at the time for the field office of Los Angeles. So he's the top FBI agent in Los Angeles. And he is, for a few years, 1940, 41, 42, looks like, he had Knoch under surveillance, as well as the Concordant Publishing Concern. They monitored at the post office. They monitor all the mail coming in to Knoch or the Concordant. And they monitor all the mail leaving, all the names, all the addresses, running cross references in their system looking for suspicious activity. The interesting thing for me is that Hood, I found out he was born in Fayette County, which is like the next county over between us and Pittsburgh. And he worked for the FBI for 20 years. When he left, he worked in Knoxville, the Knoxville office, the St. Louis office, and then by the time of this investigation, he's in Los Angeles. And interestingly enough, he moved from there to Washington, D.C., working directly with J. Edgar Hoover. So this was a inside operation, as it were, investigation and surveillance. And then interestingly enough, he retired and had after a 20-year career with the FBI, and then he moved to Pittsburgh and worked 20 years in the railroad industry, which is just a side note, but fascinating. So I just thought I'd share a few things as I read through. I'm just going to read through a few of these documents, and it's actually going somewhere, especially related, I think, to myself and to you and maybe our associates. But anyway, so there were 67 pages of documents that were in Knoch's FBI file, and they would not release 17 of those pages, but 50 of them were able to be released in the Freedom of Information Act. They were declassified. But even so, there are many redactions in these letters. For instance, there's an example of a page. Well, you're not getting much information off that page. But I love reading this and seeing what they were doing and how they were keeping an eye on them. And yes, and then of course the Hood's final determinations. Now, I might want to just throw you a backdrop, and our listeners a backdrop to why they would have been interested in Knoch. And Knoch, it was of German descent. His parents were German. His parents immigrated here. Now, Knoch was born in the United States. He was born in St. Louis. And then his parents moved when he was still at home. They moved to California. And so Knoch was a German, of German ancestry. And but he married, his first wife was Olive. And she died in 1926. They had one child, which was Ernest, which is Knoch's middle name. Knoch is, as we probably know, his name was Adolf Ernest Knoch. Of course, I guess Adolf was a pretty common German name, but It's funny that, maybe that would raise suspicion, but and so their son was named, his middle name, Ernest, who grew up in the Knoch family, helping with the ministry and helping with the office and helping with shipping. And he eventually, took over the office affairs. Um, and then even after Knoch died, he took over the editorship of the Unsearchable Riches, and his whole life was dedicated and associated with the Concordant Publishing Concern. But anyway, so Olive died in 26. And then, of course, Knoch would have been single. And so in 31, we can read this in the data of the of the personal section of the Unsearchable Riches in the editor's box and all these things. We can glean this information. So about 5 years after he had been a widow, he made a trip to Europe, Knoch did. And it was sort of a dual purpose. There was a lot of interest and support and workers for Concordant in Europe. People who contributed, people who helped with the translation work. And he went to see them, but he also went to look at original Greek source manuscripts that were in museums. And he went to study them and investigate them. So he had a dual purpose in going there, seeing the saints, seeing the operation there and people who are helping him see these manuscripts, and really the core place in Europe where there was the support and ministry that was associated with him was in Germany, and of course he was of German descent, so he went there, and he ended up. He already knew there was already a English version of the Unsearchable Riches magazine being produced in Germany. So the Unsearchable Riches magazine articles were being translated into German and released there in the German language. So he's very interested in that. There was a lady there who was very instrumental in that work. Her name was Sigrid, her first name. And she was a single lady. Her father was a German count. It's interesting because Gelesnoff was a Russian count, and because of the disruption of revolution, and he became an enemy of the state and had to flee, and he came to the United States. So he lost his nobility, and ended up, being the co-founder of the Concordant Publishing Concern. And then there's this German countess who is taking the lead role in translating Concordant material into. So he wanted to go visit them. Well, they ended up becoming engaged and married. So he married Sigrid, and he ended up, while he was there, he stayed there, and he lived there for, looks like to me, perhaps about 8 years. He lived in Germany in the 30s, in the pre-war era. During that time when Hitler was rising to power. And so they're very familiar with Hitler. They're very familiar with the political process, the times. And it's fascinating reading, even in the Unsearchable Riches as well as in this document. It's fascinating reading, concerning him living there. And actually they lived, her family, the Count, had a palace in Berlin. And he and her lived in a suite in this Count's palace in Berlin. And the economy was so bad in the 30s which was a factor that contributes into Hitler's rise and power and the war. Huge factor. We won't go into the history behind it, but it's fascinating. But Knoch had never seen such destitution as he had seen there. And he writes about in The Unsearchable Riches. It was heartbreaking to him to see the poverty, extreme poverty of the Germans, extreme unemployment. And it even says in this document that that Sigrid's household, the Count Palace, lived in near starvation from all that the FBI could find. But anyway, Knoch lived there, and now so much so that this suite at the palace in Berlin for the Count, it became the new headquarters for Concordant. At least it became the editorial, they called it the editorial office. So it was the editorial office. Meanwhile, his son, Ernest, continues to reside in Los Angeles, and he had, from his childhood, been managing the office anyway. So they had two offices. The editorial office was in Germany, and the publication office was in Los Angeles. So they had a dual office for about 8 years. And during this time, based on Knoch's the records from the Unsearchable Riches, Knoch's activity, he said that his main mission was the translation of the Greek scriptures into German. Now, most of us probably are unaware when we look at a concordant version and we think of all Knoch's work. We don't even realize that for a period of 8 years, he's focused, along with his associates there, in getting a concordant German version. It's like, can these servants in the past have been, could they have been more involved in things? And of course, he continued oversight of the translation of other concordant material into the German language, which of course Sigrid was very involved in. And by that time, there was already active translation of the Hebrew into English. And that was a primary focus of his during that time there. So talk about a busy man. Remember we talked recently about that publication, Busy, Happy Men. And so quite the work, quite the operation. And so things, began to get very difficult there. Hard to leave Germany, hard to leave with anything that was yours that you brought in. And they finally did leave in 1938. And they came back to the United States, back to Los Angeles area. And then just the next year, you can see how Knoch looks suspicious. He's of German descent. He's married to a German countess who lived in a German palace and was his concordant headquarters for 8 years. And he's involved in this huge network of distribution. Lots of mail is coming to him, and they have lots of correspondence. And so everything's suspect. Well, he looks like a pretty good one. That this is some kind of clandestine operation. And so J. Edgar Hoover in 1940 asks the field agent to begin an investigation. And again, they began to monitor all the mail coming in and out of that local post office. And they began to keep an eye on their whereabouts, their travels, where they go, who comes to see them. They began a thorough investigation of neighbors and anybody they could find who were their associates. And of course, they're all trying to figure out if what Knoch is really up to. So, when I go through this document, I'm just looking through because I think there's a couple things that I wanted to mention to you. That are fascinating. I should have put a page marker on them, I suppose. But anyway, maybe I'll just talk about it as we go. And so one thing they were very interested in, without even reading it, I'll just tell you about it because that'll take up too much time. So what they were very concerned about. And by the way, so J. Edgar Hoover orders material himself from the Concordant Publishing Concern. He wants to see what the heck's going on. And it's fascinating. Right here on this page, I don't know if you can see it, there's a mailing label in the FBI file that's from the Concordant to J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI. So he orders books. And there's copies in the FBI file what he ordered. I mean, he ordered All in All, and there's a copy of it in the FBI file. He ordered the Concordant version. He ordered the Unveiling of Jesus Christ, which is in the FBI file. So he ordered some stuff. You can only think what's going on there because it's not. He didn't order it secretly. He ordered it from the director. Maybe he's going to see if he really got anything. I don't know. And so in their looking into this, especially the Concordant version, this version was very suspicious because it had footnotes. It had various fonts were used in this version. Lots of symbols are used in the text of this version. Not only different types of font, but light colored font, bold colored font. And they suspected that it was code, that this Bible was full of code. Of course it was. Except it was celestial code, right? Oh my gosh. It was, and they suspected it was political, and it is. Because Paul says our politics are in heaven. So it is very political documents. And but not what they were suspecting. And so great detail was taken to look at this. And after what appears to be, a 2 or 3 year period where the investigation is done, they finally came to the conclusion that there were a lot of things they were confused about. First of all, lots of money was donated to them. They could, so they're watching bank accounts as well. So thousands of dollars are coming in for this operation. And then when they print a Bible, which is supposed to be their main function, and thousands of dollars came in, you think about our people who are contributing to us to help us do a study Bible, the money that's coming in. And then when it was printed, it's like 1,000 copies were printed. Okay, this seems suspicious. All this money coming in, 1,000 copies, and then they're selling them for $1. And they said this financially looks very suspicious. Something's not going. Something's wrong here. With this whole picture. And so, So yeah, it's just very fascinating. Um, so anyway, so we'll just say, so anyway, the bottom line comes down, and here's one thing I just want to say about the whole thing is that as they begin to interview people, and Hood's final conclusion is, Knoch, he and Sigrid are doing exactly what they profess to be doing. He's studying, she's translating, and it's a Bible, and it's Bible study material. One of the things that I like, that I think was interesting too, is that he stressed a few times in his investigation that that Alfred, excuse me, that Knoch, Adolf, and Sigrid are so busy they don't have any time for any clandestine, any undercover operation. These people are really consumed with what they're doing. So much so that, now here's an interesting thing. It says the Knochs never go anywhere. They're always at home. And they have no friends that visit them. And really the only time they go outside is occasionally they go out and take a walk. Wow. You want to know why Knoch got so much done? He put the blinders on and he went to work. And he had his son, who was managing the office and taking care of all those details. And he had busy, happy men all over the country and the world who are assisting in translation, who are assisting in working on the projects, So I see a couple things here. First of all, blinders on. Knoch narrowed his world to accomplish his purpose. Narrowed his world. The interesting thing I long ago learned when I'm reading through The Unsearchable Riches. There was a period where I went through The Unsearchable Riches just reading announcements, obituaries, announcements, meetings. I just love the history of it. And what you'll find is there's an absence of A. Knoch from these meetings all across the country. He's not there. He was taking care of that. Adlai Lowdy's doing that. Joseph Kirk is doing that. Long list of people who are teaching. Not A. Knoch, though. He put his blinders on. He hardly went anywhere. No one came to see him. He just zeroed in on the task at hand. And then he had someone managing the office. And then he had a network of associates, busy, happy men all over the country and all over the world who stood with him and took care of details so he could focus. Oh my goodness. That speaks to my heart. And Steve, I've been not trying. That's a bad choice of words. It's just happened that in the last number of months, there's been an effort to narrow my world, to narrow the things that occupy my time, to narrow my interest, and learn to focus. And I find out that a lot of things that don't allow me to focus is actually things that are still important and the work of the ministry Father's given us. But then he's given us resources, finances for like you. And to come and join Andre and me and our beautiful editors who are busy, happy men as well, working on the material that we have. And I realize the responsibility and the duty and the privilege and the honor that I have to reel my world in so that I can focus. And I want to thank you for your role in that. I want to thank Andy for doing this for 35 40 years with me nearly, and thank all those people you see on the BSN editors list and all those who encourage us. We got big tasks ahead of us, and this whole little historical thing sheds a little more, excuse me, don't want to overemphasize, it sheds a little more light onto things that were going on and the work that was happening and how dedicated they were to the cause that Father had given them. And we get to be the next generation. Not that there wasn't generations between what we're reading here and now, but we're up to bat. We're the next ones up to take a swing, and to make our play. And our play is a script, but we get to live it. And yeah, it says in there that from Hood said from all he could tell, and he focused on Ernest too, his son, who had been involved in this. He said, from all indications, he was a normal boy and had a normal childhood. And from all indications, he and his dad have no political views. We can't. They're not involved in this thinking. They're detached from it, And I'm like, that's our people. That's our people.